Today is Labor Day, and we are back with week number 1 defenses to stream for the 2023 fantasy football season. If you are new to the channel, this is something that we do every single week on the channel on Monday. We talk about 5 defenses that you need to be streaming in your fantasy football leagues to win your week. Obviously, there are going to be great defenses like the Patriots, the Bills, the Jets that get drafted, but those teams have hard opponents in week number 1. And even the greatest of defenses like the 49ers are going to run into buzzsaws week in and week out. So the best way to get an advantage in fantasy football leagues is streaming your defense. Even if the defense isn't that great, the defense is a little suspect, we are looking for opponents that we believe are going to turn the ball over, fumble, get sacked. We're looking against bad offenses. So in today's video, we're going to be talking in depth about 5 defenses to stream for week number 1. If you are new to the channel, like I mentioned, please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below. It helps me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotriousFantasy. Hit a like button on today's video, whether you are new to the channel or not. If you would like access to my Patreon, I'll be posting my weekly rankings on there, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end for $7.50. Make sure you guys check that out. Link in the video description. So without further ado, let's get into my top 5 defenses to stream for week numero uno, week 1 of the 2023 fantasy football season. We begin with the first defense to stream for week number 1, the Washington left hands up. Who are we? The Commanders going up against the Arizona Cardinals at home in Washington. Currently, the Commanders defense is owned in 45% of leagues on ESPN. It was announced yesterday that Jonathan Gannon, head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, says that he thinks that Clayton Tune is ready for week number 1. Now, to me, it was between either Clayton Looney Tunes or Joshua Dobbs to be the starting quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals in week number 1. We actually saw Josh Dobbs play last year, and he's not a complete and utter disaster. Would I still have streamed the Commanders up against Joshua Dobbs? 100%, but I feel even more confident going up against a rookie Clayton Tune in his first ever start. I think the Washington Commanders defense is going to eat this man alive. This game has the lowest over-under on the week from the Vegas total, set at 38.5. The Cardinals have an implied point total of 15.75, which is also the lowest on the week. They are projected to score from the implied point total just about over 2 touchdowns in that game. They are also the second largest underdogs on the week at +7. The only team that are actually bigger dogs than the Arizona Cardinals are the Texans up against the Ravens, who would definitely be a part of this video, but they are owned in 68.3% of leagues on ESPN, so I try to keep the defense's ownerships under 50% for these videos. So the Commanders going up against a rookie Clayton Looney Tunes as the starting quarterback, a Arizona Cardinals team that appears to be fire sailing every single player on the roster. This is going to be pure domination, 50 Shades of Grey style from the Washington Commanders. Now, the Commanders do face the Broncos in Denver in week 2, which means that there is a chance that you could hold on to them, but I want to see how the Broncos offense plays in week number 1 before I lock that in, right? Will Sean Payton have completely done a 180 with this offense? Will he have revived the career of Russell Wilson, or is Russell Wilson still a steaming pile of dog shit at the quarterback position in Denver? So we'll see how the Broncos perform in that game before I say that you need to keep the Commanders defense or not. Moving now to the defense to stream number 2, the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Indianapolis Colts, 15.1% owned on ESPN. Now, on paper, the Jacksonville Jaguars are far from the old Saxonville Jaguars, right? This is far from an ideal defense in the NFL. I just love streaming a defense up against a rookie quarterback in week number 1. We already know that this is an Indianapolis Colts offense that is going to be without Jonathan Taylor. Taylor. They're going to be relying on Deion Jackson as the running back number 1. This could be a very good situation for the Jaguars, despite the fact that their defense is relatively mid. This game has the 7th highest over-under on the week, set at 45.5. The Colts have the 9th lowest implied point total on the week, set at 20.75, which to me feels a little bit high, right? This is Anthony Richardson's first ever game. They don't have the best player on their offense, and their offensive line last year did not live up to expectations. The Colts are the 8th biggest underdogs on the week, set at +4, which again is shocking. I would think that the Jaguars were closer to 5.5 or 6-point favorites in this game. The Jaguars go up against the Chiefs in week number 2. And while the Jaguars defense actually played pretty decent up against the Chiefs in the playoffs, in the regular season, I don't want anything to do with the defense playing up against the Chiefs, right? The Jaguars might actually look decent against the Colts this weekend, but they are not going to look great up against the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes is going to tear them a brand new asshole. So you're going to have to drop the Jacksonville Jaguars after their game up against the Indianapolis Colts. Again, a key thing to do early on in the season when streaming defenses is streaming that defense up against that rookie quarterback. We already know Anthony Richardson is kind of suspect when it comes to throwing the rock. So this could be a game where he gets laid out a bunch of times or maybe throws multiple interceptions. Moving now to the number 3 defense to stream, the Seattle Seahawks versus the LA Rams, 7.8% owned on ESPN. So when it came to the Commanders, they were owned in 45% of leagues, so kind of a coin flip if you can get them. The Jaguars definitely readily available at 15.1%, and I would be shocked if the Seahawks defense wasn't available in your league, unless you're playing in a league where there's a bunch of dumbasses that have like 2 different defenses on the roster, which isn't actually that crazy for a lot of home leagues. Now, would I do that? No. Of course not, but is that going to happen in some leagues? 100%. While this game does have the 4th highest over-under on the week, set at 47, that is mostly because of how explosive this Seattle Seahawks offense is. It is more explosive than your diarrhea after you eat $30 worth of Taco Bell. The Rams have the 11th lowest implied point total on the week with 21.25. The Rams are the 5th biggest underdogs on the week, tied with the New England Deflatriots as 4.5-point dogs. The Seahawks face up against the Lions. If you guys have been watching my videos throughout the offseason, you would know that I am a huge Detroit Lions guy this year. This is not the Detroit Lions of the yesteryears. This is a legitimate offense with a pretty decent defense. And the Seattle Seahawks, to me, have a pretty defense, so I definitely don't want to be streaming them in week 2 up against the Detroit Lions. Definitely going to be dropping them like it's hot after this game against the Rams, but the Rams are going to be without Cooper Kupp, the most vital piece of this offense besides, I would say, Matthew Stafford. But Matthew Stafford is going into week number 1, and while everyone is real optimistic about his health, are we sure that Stafford back isn't still fucked up, that his neck isn't still messed up? I'm a little bit worried, and by a little bit, I mean I'm a lot of bit worried about Matthew Stafford this season, so this might be a team we are looking to stream our defense against a ton, especially without Cooper Kupp, right? Because even if Matthew Stafford is off this year, with Cooper Kupp, right, that's a guy that can just make anything happen, right? You don't have to throw the ball right to him for him to catch it like Van Jefferson or Puka Nuora, right? If you throw the ball within a 20-yard radius of Cooper Kupp, he's going to go out and get that shit. So without Cooper Kupp, this seems like a very ideal situation to stream your defense up against the LA Rams. Again, 7.8% owned on ESPN. Moving to my 4th defense to stream, we got the Denver Broncos going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. 7.4% owned on ESPN. This game has the 6th lowest over-under on the week at 44. The Raiders have the 7th lowest implied point total on the week, tied with the Patriots. Now, something that does somewhat concern me about this matchup is that this was a defense I really liked last year up against the Raiders, and then the Raiders lit the Broncos up like a fucking Christmas tree. And I know they're going from Derek Carr to Jimmy Guap, Jimmy G-Spot, Jimmy Garoppolo, but I do think the Raiders offense is a little under the radar. But at the same time, the Broncos actually have a really solid defense. So while I like the Raiders team, again, I don't think they're like some playoff team. I think those are sneaky good. Definitely still think the Broncos should be able to get it done. And again, they're going up against Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Jimmy Garoppolo will run out the back of the fucking end zone like he's Dan Orlovsky, and you can get a safety, right? The Denver Broncos defense should be just fine in this game. The Raiders are the 6th biggest underdogs on the week, tied with the Indianapolis Colts at +4. After the Raiders, the Broncos go up against the Commanders. So just like we talked about with the Commanders defense, we shall see how the Commanders offense looks in week number 1. Will Terry McLaurin be a huge miss for this team, right? Doesn't seem like McLaurin's going to play week 1. I'm not too sure if he's going to play week 2. So without McLaurin, is this team sinking like the Titanic, or are they able to rise above it with Jahan Dotson? Probably, because they're playing up against the Cardinals, but I need them to have a pretty strong performance in order for me to be really in on the Commanders. Say the Commanders have really turned a new leaf, because again, the Arizona Cardinals just suck donkey ass. So right now, I would say you can hold the Broncos, but wait until my opinion in week number 2 actually drops before you either cut them or hold them onto your team before we move on into the final defense to stream for week number 1. And boy, does it feel good to be talking week number 1 football. I would like to give you guys a word from our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, the NFL season has not started yet. We are still waiting until Thursday, Chiefs versus the Lions, and you can still do fantasy football drafts. Your league of record, your league with your friends from home, the office, whoever you draft with, that might have already happened, but you can still draft on Underdog Fantasy. And Underdog Fantasy is the best place to draft because it is best ball. And best ball is the most fun part about fantasy football. It's the draft, and that's it. There's no waivers, no trades, or no in-season management. At the end of every single week, Underdog automatically throws the highest scores into your lineup for you. They have the Best Ball Mania 4 contest still open, $25 to enter, 150 max entries, $3 million to first place, and $15 million in total prizes. If you're not interested in playing a big tournament like that, they also have sit and go leagues, which is basically you versus 11 other people for as low of a buy-in as $3. Top 2 teams make money. Third place gets their money back. And during the season, Underdog even has weekly contests that you guys can play in. We'll probably be streaming some of those on the channel, maybe Saturday nights if I am free. So if you want to sign up for Underdog Fantasy, you want to help me out, you want to help yourself out as well, you can get a first match deposit bonus of up to $100. You deposit $100, they give you an additional $100. You deposit $50, additional $50, $25, an additional $25. The minimum deposit to get that bonus is $10. Moving now to the final defense to stream of the week, the Minnesota Vikings, cold like Minnesota, going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home in Minnesota, 3.7% owned on ESPN. Now, I know, Nick, the Minnesota Vikings defense is literally one of the worst things I've ever seen with my own 2 eyes. The Vikings defense sucks ass. I know they do, but there is a legitimate chance that Baker Mayfield goes out there and plays just terrible. Right? We've seen the Baker games like with the Rams last year where he just pulls a rabbit out of a hat and has some huge games. But I think when push comes to shove, even though the Vikings defense is complete and utter dog shit, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense might not be good at all. Right? I am a truther of Mike Evans, but Baker Mayfield could really hold this team down in a huge way. This game has the 7th highest over-under on the week at 45.5, but just like we talked about the Seahawks game, it's kind of just because the Minnesota Vikings have an elite offense. I know Kirk Cousins isn't the best quarterback on earth, but they have Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. They also have Alexander Mattison, a couple of running backs on that team, as well as KJ Osborne. So they have a pretty solid offense. The Buccaneers have the 6th lowest point total on the week at 19.75, and they're the 4th biggest dogs on the week at +6. After this week, the Vikings play the Philadelphia Eagles, and if you stream one of the worst defenses in the NFL up against the Philadelphia Eagles, you are an insane person. We saw what the Eagles defense did to the Vikings last year in prime time in front of all of America. Probably going to happen again. This is going to be a butt-fucking of sorts of the Vikings defense, but up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think the Minnesota Vikings are a sneaky defense that you can pick up if the other defenses are owned. Obviously, I much prefer the Commanders, Jaguars, Seahawks, and Broncos over the Vikings, but if everyone in your league has like 2 defenses and the Vikings are all you can scavenge for on the waiver wire, like you have the Bills going up against the Jets, or you have one of these defenses like the Patriots that are really good, but they're going up against the Eagles, you might want to stream the Minnesota Vikings. Other defenses that I really liked but are too highly owned on ESPN to discuss in depth are the Baltimore Ravens up against the Houston Texans. If you have not had your fantasy football draft just yet, the Baltimore Ravens would be one of my bigger targets in fantasy football drafts at defense. I love going up against CJ Stroud in his first ever game. We got the Eagles at the Patriots. I know I have talked about how I think the Patriots offense is going to be a little bit better. Get rid of that bozo Matt Patricia, bring in Joe Judge, but still, the Eagles defense is going to suffocate them. And then the Dallas Cowboys at the New York Football Giants. I also like the Saints up against the Tennessee Titans. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. It feels so great to be back. Week number 1 defenses to stream. We're going to be back every single week on Monday to talk about the best defenses to stream. Week number 1 is probably the week where the most chaos happens in the NFL, right? I hate the Arizona Cardinals. I think they might win 2 fucking games next season, or this season. I really do. Right? Maybe the Cardinals go out there and steamroll the Commanders somehow. Week 1 is always insane, so don't forget about that. And do not overreact to what happens in week number 1. We see this happen every single year. Your star player has a shit game. You're like, oh my God, I need to panic. I need to trade this guy. You trade him for a half-eaten bag of potato chips and a used condom. And then the next week, he's back to his usual self. So don't panic after week number 1. I love you guys all so much. If you want to check out my Patreon, it is $7.50. It has all my draft rankings. And every single week, I'll be posting my quarterback, running backs, wide receivers, and tight end rankings on there for you guys to use. Link in the video description. If you guys did enjoy and you are new, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button as well. I love you guys all so much. Hope you always have a great one. And as always, good boy.